Hello, my name is Jim Wade. I'm a tax attorney here in Maine, and welcome back to our continuing discussion on innocent spouse relief. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the different types of relief. We talked briefly about innocent spouse is a means by which you can have your joint and several tax liability with your spouse or former spouse. We could have it sort of allocated, divided, split, however you want to say it, so you can be removed from any tax liability related to some either negligent or bad behavior on the part of your spouse. So let's get started. So Congress, in its infinite wisdom, created three types of relief. And I put in the citation there. In case you're curious, you can look under uh, Title 26, United States Code, Section 615, and that's where you'll find sort of the basics of innocent spouse relief. There are other places you can find additional detail. There's regulations that are promulgated by the IRS, but that's the starting point for all of the different types of relief. So we have innocent spouse relief. That is your traditional request for relief. Then we have separation of liability and equitable relief. Typically, you're going to go either for innocent spouse or separation of liability relief, and if that doesn't work, you can then seek relief under equitable relief. So talk about each one of them, and it is a bit complicated. Each one has its own requirements. Some are similar to the others, and others are completely different as far as their requirements. And for brevity's sake, I have omitted a bunch of different requirements of each, trying to stick to the big points, the important details. So first, we're going to talk about innocent spouse relief. That's where you're seeking to be relieved of liability due to a spouse's erroneous item. Now, it could be item or items, but those are things that are unreported income or incorrect deduction, credit, or basis in an asset. And what happens is there is a tax liability due to an audit, or maybe where there's a return filed and it creates this tax liability. You are now seeking to be relieved of it. Now, if you're requesting relief, you cannot yourself either know of this erroneous item or have reason to know of it. So that is showing that your spouse did share that information with you, or that it wasn't so obvious that you would have had a reason to know about it. Think, for example, of someone who is married to a spouse who refuses to report income from gambling winnings. If you both lived in not to be any against anybody who has a mobile home, but let's say you're living in a mobile home and your life situation does not change. You don't start buying expensive toys like cars, boats, ATVs, those sorts of things. You're sort of living that same standard of living, and your spouse is not telling you about their gambling winnings, and your life hasn't changed where you'd know about it. That would be lack of actual knowledge or reason to know of the erroneous item. On top of that, you have to also show that it would be unfair or inequitable to hold you responsible for the tax. Generally that's sort of your situation is such that, this additional tax liability is unfair to you when you consider all the facts and circumstances. Now, if you do qualify, liability will be allocated based on the erroneous item. So if you both file a return where everything except for one particular item is right, you're not going to get liability for your spouse's tax liability related to the properly reported salary or wages and other items. But if he failed to report $30,000 of income from a side business you didn't know about, the taxes related to that you could be relieved of. Now, innocent spouse relief requires that you make a request for such relief within 2 years of collection action by the IRS. So once you first become aware that there's a tax liability and the IRS is seeking to collect it from you, you got 2 years to make that request. If there's an allocation of liability and as a result you overpaid your taxes, you may be able to get a refund. All right, so let's talk about separation of liability relief. This is similar to requesting that the taxes be allocated as if you filed separately, but there must be a return jointly filed and that there is some erroneous item on that return that gives rise to this understatement of tax. And you're asking now for the separation of liability relief. The requirement, though, is that you must be divorced or legally separated from that spouse within 12 months of you requesting relief. So you cannot be living together. Again, this relief must be requested within 2 years of collection action by the IRS. And if after the allocation there's a refund due to you, you will not get it. Finally, equitable relief. This is available in situations where you would not qualify for innocent spouse or separation of liability relief. This is kind of a more wishy-washy type of relief because the IRS will look at a series of factors and apply your facts and circumstances to them to decide if they're going to grant you relief or not. I think there's like 9 factors, but the IRS says that it's not all inclusive, that they may add other factors. And what they'll say is, okay, one factor is positive in your favor, neutral, or negative. And then they'll sort of look at all of the factors and see which are positive, negative, or neutral, and then decide whether they're going to grant you relief. But there's no weight given to any particular factor. And just because there's more factors in your favor than not, the IRS can still not grant you relief. So like I said, it's kind of a wishy-washy sort of exercise. But generally, the more your story shows that it would be unfair to hold you liable and that you weren't aware of what was going on, the more likely you're going to get relief. Again, if you are granted relief, there'll be an allocation of liability. Again, like all things equitable relief, it is kind of wishy-washy how they do it. The IRS, or if you take it onto appeal, a court can allocate liability generally however they want. So it can be kind of frustrating. But if, however, after the allocation, you would have a refund due to you, you may be able to get it. And here are just some of the factors. Were you married at the, are you currently married to that person, separated? Would paying these taxes be an economic hardship to you? What was your knowledge, or should you have known of this erroneous item that gave rise to this liability, and so on and so forth? You can read the list. I won't insult your intelligence. But again, these are factors that the IRS will consider in determining whether they're going to grant you relief. All right. So we just went over briefly the 3 types of innocent spouse relief. Obviously, because of time, I didn't want to go through everything. You may have questions about, do I qualify or not? If you have any questions, certainly give us a call. More than happy to talk to you about it. And with that, look forward to talking to you on our next video.